Hi everyone, I'm Lara Russell-Jones, a director in our Defence and Infrastructure team at Newton. We are delighted to support the Women in Defence Challenger interview series, which explores so many of the tough questions and actions in developing our defence industry for the future. I'm sure we all look back proudly at progress made over the last few years, and also reflect on the milestones yet to be achieved. At Newton, we know that diversity of thought, people and backgrounds within all our teams makes us and our clients and partners stronger. We continuously push to improve our working practices and collective culture, and looking for ways to innovate, particularly in how we create space and opportunity for women to connect over their shared challenges. I always enjoy Angela's rigorous interviews, and I'm delighted to introduce the following conversation with Andy Start, CEO of DE&S. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I can't see how many are in the room, but it's wonderful to see some men in the room. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the first of our 2024 series of challenge interviews. I'm Angela Owen. I founded an organisation called Women in Defence UK, and I'm here with Andy Start, Chief Executive of Defence Equipment and Support. This afternoon, we're going to be chatting with Andy about his current and past roles, what he's seen work in the gender equity space, and how DE&S is transforming. If you go and look on LinkedIn for Andy's entry, it says, "I've spent the last 25 years helping organisations and individuals to transform and grow. My career started with satellites and launches, but most of my leadership positions haven't been rocket science. They've been about helping organisations and individuals to revisualise a more exciting future, and then helping to lead them to create that self-sustaining positive outcome." So some of the roles that Andy's done include Chief Executive of Capita Public Service, Chairman of Mid-Kent College, President of Global Government Inmarsat, a board member at Tech UK, but top of the list of appointments on his LinkedIn is Advisory Board for Women in Defence UK.
Aye.
Andy, thanks so much for talking with us today. Just a tiny bit about the format of the session. We've got about 40 minutes. The first 20 minutes or so will be one-on-one questions, Andy and myself. Then we'll come to the audience for your questions. I do have to thank Newton, who are our Pankhurst Challenge partner, who have made this possible today. If you are on X, please do tweet. It's #WIDChat or @WomenInDefence. Andy, you're a member of the Women in Defence Advisory Board. Yet when you look at the makeup of the DE&S board and executive committee, which I think is a total of about 17 people, only 4 are women. And the 13 men look to be, with huge respect, archetypal, middle-aged, white men. How do you square that with being on the board?
So you said this was going to be a challenge interview.
Yes.
Start with the pokey one. To one degree you can't, right? Where the place that we're in terms of DNS leadership, the place we're in DNS, the place we're in UK defence, is not good enough. It's got to change. We are an organisation whose mission and purpose is to serve the nation, is to help protect our nation and help it prosper. And how can you do that if you don't fully represent the nation you serve? So we're not in a good place, and we need to do better. If you look at defence overall is not successfully enough leveraging the nation we serve. And I know from my history of running organisations that are genuinely diverse, that means that we're leaving a lot of capacity and capability on the table. And when you've got 10,000 vacancies across aerospace, defence and security, not accessing a significant part of your workforce is just putting the nation at a national disadvantage. So we've got to fix it. So how can I sit comfortably on the Women in Defence board? I don't sit comfortably. I sit on the board because things have to change.
Thank you. And I'm very pleased to have you on the board, by the way. So DE&S is a signatory to the Charter, and your ambition for DE&S matches the Charter ambition to have 30% of roles at all levels filled by women by 2030. Will you reach that ambition, and how's it going?
Overall, firstly, the ambition 30 by 30 is a good one for the industry because we've got a job of work to do to get there. It's not where we should really be. We've got 51% of women in the workforce. We should be striving to be at least 50-50. But nevertheless, in terms of that goal, we're sitting at about 35% women representation today. So that's good relative to the overall defence sector. Mm-hmm. It's poor relative to the UK MOD civil service, which is at about 46%. It's got a job of work to do to get up to where we need to be in terms of a target. Particularly weak is our representation at senior levels. That's a fairly classic in diversity and the diversity dynamics. But if we don't get more senior people in at the top, we won't address the base because people need to see people who look like them, who feel like them, that gives them the aspiration to get to join an organisation and work their way through it. We are improving. Mm-hmm. So I'm delighted to see in our most senior leadership cadre, we're sitting at about 26%. So that's better. It's up 6% over the last 5 years, which is directionally correct. But it isn't where it needs to be.
Yet you have 2 female major generals, which is highly unusual and great to see.
We are increasingly getting. So what I think I should say is that these things go up and down. Very early on in my tenure, the number of senior women on the most senior team on my exec team went down because I was very delighted to be able to get one of my senior women promoted to a bigger job. But that impacts in your statistics. But no, we are changing as a leadership cadre. We've just gone through a major restructuring of D&S, really putting in place a different culture, one that's much more empowering and enabling. And in doing so, as we selected for that leadership team, we made sure diversity an understanding of diversity and the importance of diversity was one of the criteria we were really looking for. So not you must be female to progress, but you must understand why diversity empowers an organisation. In doing that, it's helped the organisation, and yet we've got some spectacular people at the top of our organisation, some of whom are on the front row, in really senior positions, and they're fabulous role models. What's important is they got those jobs because they happen to be the best. They didn't get those jobs because we wanted to fulfill a statistic. But our organisation is better because we encourage diverse shortlists. So we really push people hard to go the extra mile to make sure they have tried to encourage diversity in that pipeline. That's really important. Recruiters don't like to do that. It's hard work. If you're a well-known woman in defence industry, recruiters are going to be trying to give you 25 jobs. If you're not a well-known woman in the defence industry, people are not going to come and find you unless you make them work for it. And if you're slightly outside slightly out the sector, recruiters are not going to naturally come and knock on your door. So you've got to work at getting diverse shortlists. So we're getting after it, and I'm delighted that some of those senior individuals we've now got are amazing role models.
You've worked in the private sector and now in the public sector, and before in the public sector. In fact, your last role before DE&S was Capita. in the equity, inclusion and diversity space, and not just women, across the board in diversity terms, do you see any differences in either the challenges faced or the approaches used between the public and private sectors?
I think sort of lived experience is things are much easier to do within the private sector. You can drive change much more quickly in the private sector, which means when you set your mind to it, when you want to rapidly change an organisation, it's easier to do in the private sector. I can't take credit for this. My group chief executive should take credit for it. But the capita culture that he joined was one that was very male-dominated. The one that he left was one that had a fully diverse board, both gender and race, a fully diverse exco, properly balanced, and a transition of a message. One of my senior leaders at Capita turned around to me and said, 10 years ago, I was having a conversation with my boss who thought I was brilliant. But that boss said that he was not prepared to put me forward for a job because it would be career limiting for him to suggest a woman. She then said, look at me now. Look at where I am. I never thought I could be there. Now, that transition was about a 5-year transition under his leadership. That was dramatic. It's harder to do in a more regulated, more controlled civil service environment, simply because of the, quite right, scrutiny we have over hiring, over appointments, over the processes. But it can be done, and we're determined to do it.
What about your suppliers? I mean, what would you like your suppliers to be doing in the, again, broad equity, inclusion and diversity space? So
if you look at defence industry, representation is about 28, 29%. That's not okay. So collectively, with industry, we are putting the nation at a disadvantage because we're not getting enough diversity into our supply chain. So what I want suppliers to do, I want them to smash through that 30 by 30, but I want them to just keep going and get to the point where we are genuinely diverse and harnessing all of the power that's available. That's easier said than done because our suppliers are engineering heavy. Within my organisation, the thing that really skews the stats down is that my largest function is engineering. And in engineering, we only have 12% female representation. Unless we fix engineering and the diversity within engineering, within D&S, we will not get to where we want to be. But that is true even more so within our suppliers who are very, very engineering heavy. And in the UK, the diversity stat's 15%. China's at 40% in engineering for women. That's a strategic problem for the nation that we as a nation have to go after because we are denying access to talent that the nation needs. So we need industry to work with us to go after that. That's the bad news. The good news is certainly within the Defence Suppliers Forum, they are really energised about changing that. So Jo Osborne, who's on the front row, is my co-diversity chair at D&S. She's also my head of people, and she's also the co-chair within the DSF, together with Paul Livingston, who is also on the Women in Defence Board and a fabulous advocate for change. Paul and Jo are determined to work with industry to change that dynamic. But they also need to work with academia, which is why they're working with the likes of UCAS to encourage more women into the defence industry and more women into STEM. And we've got to change the underlying perception of the industry as an opportunity for women. In that engineering space, what excites me is just how the mood of attractiveness for defence is changing in young people. I just did a effectively a tour of the 3 countries within the Union. And every company that I visited had an amazing apprenticeship scheme, absolutely amazing. And the vibrancy of that apprenticeship scheme was fabulous. And the diversity, the diverse representation amongst those apprentices was really good. I mean, it's some of those organisations 50-50, just as it should be. And talking to those young women about why they were joining because they had seen how exciting the jobs were. Those companies had reached out and engaged them in school. They'd shown them that it wasn't the misogynist, dirty, unpleasant, inflexible industry that is the industry of the 1940s. It is something very different. It's exciting and it's worthwhile and purposeful. So for me, that's what excites me, is to see that coming in at the bottom of the age range of defence, and we just got to keep at it.
I mean, to me, that's exciting as well, because the thing that worries me is the image of defence and how can we improve that. And it sounds like those companies are really getting after that.
We need to do this more systemically, and it's a conversation that we have within the DSF and within our communications professionals. Is we need to make sure that as we communicate, we're communicating to all audiences, and that needs to include women, and that means you need to do some things that are targeted. We're now doing targeted recruitment, getting language and imagery right to make it clear that this is a place you can thrive. And the more that we can do things like this, but the more we can get those exemplar leaders out talking about the opportunity, the more people will feel this is a place that they can succeed and thrive, and it's somewhere they want to be.
Yeah. As someone who spent 15 years in defence, I totally agree. This is a slightly off sort of the beaten track question, so bear with me. DE&S has recently improved its flexible working offer. New joiners can join flexi-time from day one, and staff can now make 2 flexible working requests in any 12-month period. There was a book published a while ago called The Power of Difference by Simon Fanshawe. He has an interesting view in the book, which is flexibility is the flaw. Bear with me. Companies and organisations enable flexibility at work in order to accommodate women's need to work and also fulfil their family responsibilities. The dominant narrative being that what holds women back is the imbalance between family life and work, so orgs needs to take steps to relieve it. Flexibility as part of the offer to women is seen as a way of increasing the numbers of women at senior levels. Now, new research shows that men and women are experiencing similar levels of distress over the pull between family and work, but are encouraged by what organisations are offering to deal with it in directly opposite ways. Even if unspoken, women are being expected and expecting to use flexibility. Men, whilst feeling the same upset and guilt that they aren't spending enough time with their families, expect to carry on at work. So flexibility, instead of being, and we would say flexibility is great, he thinks flexibility is the flaw. Comment?
Ooh, that's complicated. Some of our very senior women happen to be married to other very senior men who are also in the defence sphere. And they have this exact dynamic of how do the two of them balance. And if you're from my generation, you have a set of archetypes where, in my family, where I had a very powerful and capable mother as well as a capable father, the capable mother was the person who did everything and then did everything at home as well. So I've always had a bias that women are more capable than men simply because I saw that in my home life. There's an element of that still being true. There are, if you look like me, you sound like me, and in my generation, you've been brought up with those stereotypes and you have to fight those stereotypes. Some of those men who are married to some of those women are really good at taking their half of the burden, and some of them are not. But there are there are stereotypes that we're fighting to change that dynamic, and we have to fight that stereotype. A big part of that is about recognizing that the current reality is there are far too many people like me at the top of an organization, and we cannot live the lives of others. And so we don't think about these things. They're just, I go back to my Capita times. Some of my attitudes towards microaggression were set by the fact that I thought microaggression was hype and a myth, because I didn't ever see it. What changed that for me at Capita was a brilliant mutual mentoring scheme and a brilliant mutual mentor who happened to be a Jamaican-born woman who's amazing. But she was prepared to be brave enough to share with somebody like me her lived experience and the facts and the data of not only her experience, but also of her brother's experience of what it's like to be a black man in London. And the microaggression that both of them see, different, but both of them see every day. And my attitudes toward microaggression changed dramatically through that mutual mentoring dynamic. So we've introduced mutual mentoring within Defence Equipment Support to help the majority that look like me and think like me to start to appreciate the fact that is not everybody else's lived experience. That helps you put other people's shoes on. There's a great quote in To Kill a Mockingbird, which was my age 14 English literature class, which is you never really know a person until you put their shoes on and walk around in them for a while. Mutual mentoring is fantastic for that, and it helps us, if you look like me, sound like me, start to think differently. Does that mean that I go home and remember that it is my job to put the washing on? My wife will say no, because she keeps having to remind me. Does it piss her off? Yes. Does she tell me? Yes. Am I trying to get better? Yes. And I think that's the dynamic in all these spaces. If we can make people like me aware of the dynamic that others are feeling, we may not solve it in a day, but at least we'll move in the right direction, and that will improve the scenario.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's making people at the top understand, aware of the dynamic that others are feeling, that perhaps young men coming into the industry do want to be dads, to be able to be dads as well, visibly at work.
Yeah.
One more question. The panel event following on from this is on the topic of diversity of thought, conditions for success. Do you think the MOD suffers from a lack of diversity of thought? Or I'm going to steal a phrase from Matthew Syed's book, Rebel Ideas. He calls it collective blindness. As you can tell, he wasn't expecting this.
No. I'm going to answer it in two ways.
Fine.
The first is that one of the wonderful things about coming into defence when you spent a career in defence industry is to discover the amazing richness of talent and diversity of thought and skills and experience that exists inside the MOD and particularly inside DE&S, which is this fabulous fusion of serving military, of veterans, of career civil servants, and of industry, fused into one organisation. The diversity of thought is actually really quite phenomenal. But could it be better by being more diverse? Yes, of course it could. My best lived experience of diversity was as a president in Inmarsat. Inmarsat's history was an intergovernmental organisation. Uh-huh. So it was formed by 30 plus nations. And because it was space and it was cool, it was full of women as well as full of men. So it was full of lots of gender diversity, lots of national diversity, and lots of race diversity. And there is no question that having a genuinely diverse leadership team, it was almost perfect in terms of the numbers working for me. That was a really, really high quality leadership team that did take time to form conclusions because we were so diverse, but the quality of the thinking was phenomenal. So could defence be better? Yes, of course it could. But it's actually got a good place to start, particularly within my organisation has got this lovely fusion of capabilities.
Thank you for that.